tips, share ideas, and also, okay, I think I'm going to start back. Okay, good. So thank you very much, each and every one of you. Welcome to the Leoneans in Technology Tech Talk series. This is an initiative that was set up by SLinT team members to see how best we can share our knowledge, experiences, and also our experiences in with the cutting edge, with the tech fields, and also to network and then share our work that we are doing together as Leoneans and as the tech specialists or the tech enthusiasts. So for today's session, I am your moderator, and I would like to introduce our speaker for today's session. Our speaker, as you have seen from the flyer, his name is Sahr. Sahr is an experienced senior security engineer with over 7+ years of experience supporting large government and non-government organizations. Sahr is dedicated a dedicated learner with experience with the management SIE practitioner, especially as it relates to Splunk. He has consulted as a Splunk resource with government agencies such as the United States Department of Census Bureau, Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, and Department of Veterans Affairs, DA. He also deployed Splunk across well-known financial agencies such as Wells Fargo. So I want to welcome Sahr to what so he can unmute his microphone and then start his presentation. And note that if you have any question, please feel free to send it in the text box while Sahr is presenting, or after his presentation, then we will open the floor for Q&A session and also for the discussion and suggestion. Thank you very much. Okay, Sahr, you got the floor.
Cool. Hey, thanks, Zane. Hey everyone, I hope you guys can hear me okay. I'm ready to share my screen. Let me know if you can't see my screen when I share it. So give me just a second. All right, so let's just share the presentation. All right, cool. All right, let's hit the slideshow deck. All right, can everyone see my screen? Give me a second, let me take off this narration piece.
Sure. We can see the screen. Sure.
Keep showing that. Test. Perfect. All right, cool. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another series of SLinT Tech Talks. My name is, already stated, it's Sahr Lebbie, Splunk Architect, OpenPath LLC. And here's a little bit about me. Born in Lungay, initially raised in Kano, migrated to the US in 1994. I was actually headed down the PT track for a bit until 2013 or so, where I was like, man, this is not going to cut it. I'm not trying to get into crazy student loans, and then doing Linux after that, and then got into Splunk shortly after that. And then, I've been doing Splunk for almost 7 years now. One wife, these are my kids here. And then I'm a big Niners guy, LeBron fan, chess fanatic, and here's some career stuff about me. So just a little small intro. And in terms of like the whole flow of, this session, feel free to just, ask me questions in the chat, or, you can even unmute and ask a question if you want to as well. So I'm not too big on formalities per se. So, all right. So here's the nice little Google/Splunk's definition of itself. And then I'll get more descriptive based upon my experience, of course. So what is Splunk? Splunk is a software platform widely used for monitoring, searching, analyzing, visualizing machine-generated data in real time, performs capturing, indexing, correlating the real-time data, a searchable container, and produces graphs, alerts, dashboards, and visualizations. So that's the nice little, dictionary definition. But essentially what Splunk is basically it's a big aggregator. So what that means is it pulls a bunch of information together from different sources, as you can see here, whether it's Windows, Linux, VMs, or cloud environments, applications, databases, networking tools. It doesn't matter. It can, as long as there's a digital footprint, Splunk can pull that data in, and it can allow you to then put that into a database and index it. So it is schema on write, so it doesn't really care about schema on read. So you know how databases, you have to have certain formats to have that data come into it in order for it to be processed. Splunk does not care about that. Splunk just says, send me what you have, JSON, CSV, TSV, raw. I don't really care. Just send it to me and I will make sense of it. The only thing Splunk doesn't do well is typically with binaries. You have to break that down in itself before Splunk can read that and look at that nice, pretty format. All right, so that's a bit about that. Here's a real high level architecture, and we'll get, I guess, a little bit more in the weeds, not too deep, a little bit later, but so high level architecture. So think about the GUI. So whenever you do like a web search or whatever it is, you're on the search head. So that's one of the Splunk components. You basically sit on there and then you run a query that, can look at the indexers, which essentially are the databases that has all your information. Then your forwarders are basically like your agents. So these agents then sit on different endpoints, whether it's like your users' laptops, your VMs, or any other host machine that allows third-party applications to be installed. It sits there, it listens, collects information, via scripts or whatever it is, and it can then pivot that information directly to indexers. So that's that. All right, so what are some typical use cases of Splunk? There's many. As you can see here, I listed quite a few, right? So from a security perspective, just think about if you have the data source and you have the information that's needed, you can basically, tell or paint any picture that you want, whether that's good or bad, that's to be decided, but essentially you can paint any picture. So if somebody gets into your network and they start doing reconnaissance and, start sending a little bit packets, whether it's DNS exfil or other, you can see all that traffic because it's logged somewhere, right? It's just now for you to make sense of that. And that's what Splunk does from a security perspective. From a SIM tool, it's able to utilize basically all information gathered from IDS, IPS, your web servers, to your local instances, to event logs, syslogs. It grabs all that stuff and says, hey, this is what I see. And I think this might be happening in this environment. And then you can look at, let's say, currently I'm in Atlanta, and 10 minutes from now, within my customer's environment, I end up being in, Pakistan, right? So Splunk can say, hey, that's kind of weird. This dude logged in, and we were able to map his public IP to Atlanta, and now he's in Pakistan. So either they're using a VPN or they're, doing spoofing or something. They're doing something weird that's, having their IP just kind of changed to a random location, or somebody's hacked into our network. Either way, investigate, figure out what's going on. So that's a general security use case, right? From an operational perspective, you can see here, just looking at like resource utilization on a specific subsystem. So if you have a database that's running high in memory or CPU, and how that's being allocated, you can use Splunk to triage that. So if it's, spiking at 9 o'clock on a Saturday, what's causing that issue? And can we predict that? And if we can predict that, what can we do from that? So then you can then link up Splunk with a SOAR tool, SOAR with a capital SOAR, security, orchestration, automation, and just response. So basically you just, finish out the life cycle of responding to an incident. So making sure your web server doesn't go down and people can't access your website, or that your store doesn't go down and then people can't shop. So those are just different use cases there. Then, of course, if somebody is not logging in and, or coming to work on time, you can look at accountability issues. And then, there's so many other use cases, man. Just it's a lot. From a developer's perspective, you can look at code consistency across different systems to make sure that's being deployed accurately. And then whether you're using Agile, you can look at the different sorts of I guess pushes that have been done if you're using like SVN or something like that, which we'll talk about. So if somebody is not doing what they need to do in terms of ticketing, you can track that. Then you can link that up with other sorts of tasks that they've been assigned that are outside of the ticketing system. So whether it's Jira, ServiceNow, any other ticketing system that you use, you can then link that with other sorts of target tasks that they're doing that's not necessarily within their that system. And then you can say, okay, this is basically level effort that it takes, and this is where this engineer is at. And then, of course, at the project, management perspective, that's a big thing, right? Because you can then graph and look at, when people have done certain things and when they haven't accomplished certain things and why that is. So, and then in terms of the so much more, part, I mean, I built a COVID-19 dashboard using Splunk, just tracking it and then sending me alerts, based upon like the deaths and then, the new use cases and stuff. So I was getting those alerts on my phone. I can just look at that. That's one. You can look at power outages and you can start predicting those. Flight fluctuations. So if you want to track prices, you can actually do that. You can web scrape a specific site and then you can pull that in and you can start tracking when prices change and say, oh yeah, now I got an alert that tells me when this price has dropped to, $1,300. In our case, going to Sierra Leone, right? Price per ticket's like what? $2,000. So you can track it when it, drops to a specific price and then look at that. There's many different use cases, right? For using Splunk or not just Splunk, but any tool that ingests data. All right, so let's go to the next slide. All right, cool. All right, so this is a general overview of like what most Splunk environments are at right now, especially the ones that are not mature. So, this is, I guess, a higher level picture of what a Splunk architecture will look like. So you have a search head cluster. So on the search heads right here, and my mouse is sort of freezing here, so apologize. But here, your search heads are here. So what happens is your users get access to this layer right here. So the users log in, whether through VPN or if they're on the network directly, go to whatever site you have as far as URL. They log in, they're able to do their searches against whatever indexers are allotted to this index, to this search head cluster, and then they're able to run their searches. So within this indexers, there's certain indexes that control role-based access. So if my user is not supposed to see logs from, tax audits and stuff, then I would control that at the search head layer by, putting roles there that, limit what they can see, based upon, basically think about, if you have a book, like what page within a book you can look at. So I can limit that at this level here. And then whenever search runs, it basically sends information with all the different sorts of permissions that person has, and then it returns results based on that. And it says, hey, you can't do that. You can't run a search against your IT operations because you're freaking tax person or whatever. So that's just an example of your HR or whatever it is. So typically when you have to do these configurations, you have to log into, depending on how big your architecture is, you have to log into either the nodes directly and to make those changes. My mouse froze again. So let's say at the search head level, you have to log in if you have just one search head at each search head, if it's not clustered, or you log in at the deployer, the deployment server, master node, for the, or cluster masters it's called for the indexers. So what that means is you literally have to log into these instances every time then to make a change, just to push it out to the indexers or to the search heads if you're using a deployer, and then to many forwarders. So let's say you have 10,000 or 40,000 different forwarders. You can't put 40,000 different forwarders on one deployment server. You need to scale that out. Each deployment server may manage maybe 4,000 or so. That's like the recommendation. And the index, the cluster master itself has a limitation as well. You don't want to put, 400 indexers to one cluster master. That's just not, it's not a wise move there. So what you may want to do then is you may want to scale with different deployment servers. So maybe have 3 or 4, but you don't want to log into 3 or 4 deployment servers each freaking time just to make, a simple change. Like let's say you wanted to collect, security logs from Linux systems, or you want to collect some, specific application logs that you just deployed to your environment. You don't want to log in directly to each deployment server to pull that. Let's say you have a DMZ environment and you have a deployment server that's, tasked at managing all your DMZ servers, or you have something that's targeted at all your external servers. So all of that, you don't want to manage one by one. You want to use a process that manages that. In comes in a DevSecOps like frame, right? So it's similar to the SDLC process in the sense that an SDLC software development lifecycle where you have to manage things in an order or in a process that makes flow a lot easier to, go forward or backwards, and allow you to do continuous integration and continuous deployment. So we tend to try to use the same thing in the DevSecOps world, where we develop new integrations and we develop new sort of plans, and we develop it in focus of security and also the focus of operations. But there's also a development piece where coders and whatnot may utilize, like I said earlier, may utilize some of the different logs to, troubleshoot what's happening within the environment. So we typically start, of course, here at the planning phase. My mouse got stuck again. Come on. All right, so here we go. So you start at the plan, code, build, test, release, deploy, operate, and monitor. So some of these verbiage, semantics in a sense that it refers to something a little different in security, depending on your environment. SDLC is SDLC, but it differs depending on which environment I guess you're in. So, all right, let's go on to the next. There we go. All right, so let's start at the plan phase. So this is typically the longest phase in any, oh my gosh, my mouse froze again. Any life cycle within the DevSecOps framework. So in here you have your use case definition. So let's say we wanted to build something that monitors for troublesome SAM, or for any zero-day attacks, or like let's say the print spooler. So if any of you are not familiar with like the print spooler incident that recently happened, it's basically where hackers are able to utilize a vulnerability within the print function, that they can hack Windows systems and then use the remote sort of functionality to then do privilege escalations and then have access to certain things that they typically won't have access to. And it could be a very low level user. So what typically they recommended is to disable the print spooler functionality on any system that's not, responsible for handling, remote print spooling functions. So what you can do is then deploy, a PowerShell script that checks if a print spooler function is enabled on that system, and then if not, don't do nothing. But if it is, then you can either run a, secondary playbook that basically says, hey, stop this from running. So that's a general use case. There could be plenty more, as we talked about before. All right. I'm so sorry, my mouse is going bonkers. All right, so anyway, resource risk analysis. So basically here we talk about like the risk portion, right? So if what we're deploying, is it going to be safe? Is it going to be functional? Is it going to be something that's going to utilize a lot of resources on the system? So let's say you want to gather some new logs from databases. If the database is already up to capacity, or let's say 85 or 90, 90% running on memory or CPU, whatever it may be, you may not want to deploy another script or whatever it is, or integration that's going to cause it to increase that utilization. So that's just something to think about. And then in terms of compliance, are you adhering to whether it's GDPR, HIPAA, SOX, whatever compliance methods you have to adhere to? Are you, NIST standards? Are you compliant to that? So those are things to think about within this phase. Retention, how long are you keeping, the logs if you're going to be grabbing logs, or how long are you going to be keeping this specific functionality? Is it only to manage a zero-day threat, or is it to do something else? Scalability, are we going to, deploy this to other systems? Are we just going to test this out initially within our, production 1 account, or production 2, or Azure environment, or, AWS? Just depends on, how you have your security environment segmented. And then rollback and productivity piece. So of course, how are we going to move back if this fails, or if this starts causing issues? And then the most important piece here is to document, right? So as you go through this process, you need to document. And typical tools I've used within this phase of planning, Jira, ServiceNow, SysAid. There's a few other tools that I've also used as well. I see Ishak, I think you raised your hand, so feel free to unmute and ask a question, man.
No, I'm okay.
Okay, no problem. All right, cool. Give me a second. All right, so let's continue then. All right, so if you're not talking, if you can just mute for me. All right, so next piece. All right, so work for the coding portion. So whether you use, Python, JS, Bash, PowerShell, doesn't really matter. Splunk is able to read anything that's text related. So any ASCII characters, it can pull into Splunk and say, hey, I got something. And this is what your output of whatever it is. So if you scrape a website for malicious IPs, you can pull that into Splunk. If you scrape a website to see if there's anything that's been updated, let's say you scrape some schema that you have on your internal, Git page, and you want to pull that into Splunk and then do create a CSV file of that, and then see if anything changes, do a diff and send an alert, say the schema's changed. That's also something you can do. So all of that can be worked through, of course, your code editor of choice. I typically use Atom or Sublime to do my scripting and all that jazz. And then in terms of like a shell editor, I use Vim for the most part. VI, as many of you knows. So if you like to use Nano, that's fine, or Emacs, that's fine. But typically in our environment, so this is what we do. We code here. And then within our coding phase, we basically are going to utilize a subversioning tool that's going to pull down likely a repo that we'll use, which I'll talk about in the next portion. And then, of course, we document. So as you code, you put some type of course, comment within your coding language of choice. All right. So the build process, right? So within the build process is where we utilize, tools such as GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket, our subversioning tool. So let's say we have a repo for going to the next page. Let's say we have a repo, right, for a deployer. I don't know why it has deployer, our deployer. So this manages our search ads. So as I mentioned earlier, this is where your users sit. So this is where people are able to run searches across your indexers and tell what data sources you have. So let's say you have a new role that's being added and you want that role to do X, Y, Z. So you don't want to, either go onto each search ad to do that and have it replicate, which is what happens within a cluster. Let's say these weren't clustered. You don't want to have to go to each search ad to do that, or even go to the deployer and, maybe boo-boo something, right? So what you would want to do is you want to create a repo for this. So you're going to create a repository that has all your configurations that get pushed down to your search ads. And that repo is going to sit somewhere over here, right? So it's initialized somewhere in some directory locally on this deployer. And then from there, it then gets pushed. So you can either use that sort of methodology, or you can initialize it from, let's say, another automation tool. And then that would then push it from an external source directly to your deployer. And this is where you'll have like a tool like Ansible or SCCM if you're using like Windows, to then push it out to, you know, let's say your instances that, you know, based upon the operating system type. Doggone it, mouse. All right, cool. So I will show you a repo probably at the end of the session of what that would look like. All right, same thing. You'll have a repo for your cluster master and your deployment server, and then you'll be able to do your build process and then push it out that way. All right, so in the testing piece, so this is somewhere in between the build and test phase. So what would typically happen is you have your repo, you do your coding piece over here on whatever, you know, coding platform or you know, editor of choice you want to use, and then you will call down your Git or SVN version tool you're using. You call it down, and then you say, all right, I call down to my repo, and then now what I'm going to do then is make my edits, create my branch, and all that other stuff. So if you're not familiar with like how, you know, Git and all that other stuff works, basically you work off of like a master branch, like a master thing that everybody has access to. And then you create like your own local copy. So that local copy is you edit and making changes or whatever it is. Then what you want to do, then you push that up. So I wish I did a Git diagram. I didn't think about that. But anyway, you would then, if you want to make a change, let's say to your search heads, right? What you would do then is you would make a change on your local laptop, not directly on here, your local laptop, somewhere here as a user. And then from that local laptop, then what you'll do then is you'll push those changes to the master branch. And then within your master branch, you'll then have, you know, people that said, hey, this is a good change, it's not a good change. We're going to approve this or we're going to deny this. And then if they approve everything, then that gets merged to the master. Then when anybody else pulls a copy of that new master copy, then they have your changes merged into that. So that's how that would work in a sense. Same sort of process within the security environment, nothing different there. We pull it down, we push it, and then from there we then build using Jenkins or whatever build tool, Bamboo, JetBrains, whatever it is that you want to utilize to do the build process. And with some environments I've been in, we use Docker, and then whatever images we use within that, we're able to then deploy, you know, with if we're using like a SDK, whatever it is, to, you know, do some other sort of fancy configurations. We'll use that within that container there to do that. And then typically within that build phase, we would also have Ansible to actually do the deployment. So Jenkins would then do the merging and say, hey, this is good. Everybody's approved this, you know, we're good to go. Now I need to actually push this out to the instances. So in most environments I've been in, we use Ansible to then do the actual push once that's been, you know, built and merged together. So once this is then done within the testing phase still, we then deploy in our development environment, and then we validate POC proof of concept to make sure that this is actually, you know, what we expect it to do and it's working the right way. We analyze any risks. So if there's anything that, you know, unforeseen that we didn't think about, environment variables, things like that, then we, of course, document as always. Release portion is basically released to the staging environment. So there have been some environments where we do release to dev. You know, we complete this whole life cycle within one environment, and then we do the same thing within staging, and then we do the same thing within production. But in some environments I've been in, we test and then we release to staging, and then we deploy in production. But there's some environments where we do all of this in dev, we do all of this in stage, we do all of this in production. It all depends on, you know, if you have those environments and based upon the way that your, you know, team has decided to move towards deploying, you know, new applications and integrations. All right, so within that, you know, most of what you'll be doing is, you know, still interacting with your SVN and pulling down and doing merging to, you're basically repeating the same process. The only thing is, of course, you don't have to recode. You just have to then deploy that configurations that's been deployed into your dev environment and that you built and merged, and then you do that same process and you then push it to stage. And then same thing, analyze risk, look at environment variables, and then you can probably start, understanding the nuances behind each environment, maybe certain variables that you didn't think about within, let's say, the dev environment stage and production, that you're like, hey, maybe we should think about this environment variable that's set that we need to consider. All right, so the workflow deploy piece. So within here, again, talked about this before, you deploy to production. So within here, your PR process is typically a little bit stricter. So your approvals is where, hey, if we're going to actually deploy this production, we may have 3 or 4 approvers versus having just 2. And we may need to scrutinize this and a little bit tighter. And we may need to also look at, let's say, if we have any issues with certain, what do you call it? The deployment cycles that I guess aren't followed. So let's say your dev and stage, you deploy, twice a week, or, if it's once a week, and then production, you deploy once every month, or you deploy once every 2 weeks. So that's also something to consider as you're trying to line up, your workflow process. And then I did put this little link in here where you can look at, and I'll go to it quickly. And then let me see. I don't think you guys can see it because I'm only sharing that screen. So let me stop share. Let me reshare my deck on screen again. All right, so let's go here. All right, not here, here. All right, so I mentioned that, developers like to use Splunk or any SIM tool to be able to, track issues. So in here, this is, tracking stuff that's, been pushed within Git. As you can see here, what's been added, restore member, add members, invite members, and then any changes that have been merged, things like that. You can track those different requests. If a PR has been made, it's been approved, things like that. You can track all this stuff within here, and then you can see that. Then you can have also triggers within Splunk to be able to tell you, hey, this has been done. Let's send an alert, or let's send maybe some type of response using some Sahr tool that can automate, a response from that. I think I see something within chat. Okay, I mean, you just were saying, ask questions. All right, so that's that. Let's go back to my PowerPoint screen. You guys can see my PowerPoint now, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, we're almost done. Operate and monitor. So within the operational phase, this is where we literally we operate. We make sure that, whatever we deployed out, is making sense and it's actually functioning the way that we want it to work. So we utilize any new functions that we've then deployed to make sure it's giving us the outcome that we expect. And then of course we track for any bugs and anything else that needs to be there. And then you can do any sort of like role-based controls as you need to within there. If it's like you're grabbing new logs and you're putting it into that, most of the stuff should already be done in advance, within planning. You've already sort of, done that within coding. So let's say you're onboarding new logs for users' addresses. So that's like PII information, right? So you don't want just anybody to see that, so you would want to also create not only the ingestion pipeline. So if I were to go back within my flow over here, so at the indexer level, so you deployed the universal forwarder or some agent or script or whatever it is that's ingesting logs from wherever, and you're putting it into your index to your database. So as that stuff is getting added to your database, what you would want to do at that stage then is create policies at the search head layer to say the data that's coming into here, only certain people need to access that. So all of this is going to be part of your planning phase. So as you're coding, you're also coding for stuff within your search head layer and your indexer layer to make sure that that's been done there. So just make sure that you're tracking all that stuff within your playing phase so that you're just not deploying something and then you kind of, allow free for all access and to everybody. These tools that I've mentioned, by the way, are not all inclusive. These are just tools that I work with. So, there are plenty of other tools. I mean, there's hundreds of other tools out there. This is just some of the tools that I've used within the environments I've worked in. All right, so the last piece is just the monitor phase. So here you would just monitor the effectiveness of the solution that's been, deployed. You get user feedback to say, okay, we're getting, real, usage out of this. So like most recently, let me share with you guys something also. Let me hide this. Let's do. All right, so recently I built a little TA that does a cert checker, blah, blah. So it checks for certificates and all that stuff to see whose certificate expired, what's good, what's bad. So here's like a few that I've, it just checks certificates and then it tells you the expirations. I don't know what's going on with this one, but let's go to, let's do a quick search, right? So if we were to do a quick search for that, let's run this for 30 days because I know it's here. So here is a, it's a simple script that I run to grab data for certificates and all that. So within here, I look at the ports. It could be, typically it has to be a, SSL port if we're checking against certs, and the URLs, and then, when the actual cert expires. So this is one example, right? So looking at that and then going back to, user feedback of that to say, hey, we would like for it to tell us a little bit more. Maybe we want to grab the different, algorithms that, or the ciphers rather, that are used within that cert, or we want to grab, let's say, the CN to look at the different common names that are used to make sure that is what we're going to be using moving forward. We want to look at the CA. So things like that are what you can do, like, version 1, 2, 3, and 4, so those are different things that you want to track within this monitor phase. And typically within this phase, you also use, of course, your regular ticketing systems like, Jira, ServiceNow, or then if you have like a enhancement process. So if there's a website where they do enhancement requests, whatnot, then that's what gets submitted. And then if there are bugs and stuff like that, this all gets added into this part of the lifecycle. And then if you need to scale, you need to do a little bit more with it. Let's say you want to automate other portions of what you just deployed. This is also part of this monitoring phase right here. And then of course you document, and document. All right, so I try to keep on track, and I'm going to leave time now for questions. So I will stop here and give folks time to ask me any questions that you have, if any.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for such an amazing presentation. So, guys, if you have any question, any comment, or any suggestion, please, you can unmute your microphone, and then the floor is open. Thank you.
Man, I hope I didn't do that bad of a job, man. No one's any comments.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
This is Dr. Kamara. How are you?
Good. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. Hearing you pleases me so much. This is a very high tech. Are you working with this? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you said, am I working with what now?
Are you working with this one right now?
Yes, I am.
Yes, I'm saying it's a very high tech. Who is the vendor? Who is the vendor of this software?
It's actually Splunk. So Splunk is the vendor, and the tool is actually called Splunk too. Yep.
Okay. it's very much admirable because based on your explanation, one could see the reasoning very high. These people use very high probability in this coding.
Yep.
Yeah, because of the sensors you're talking about, those are the area, and the system tries to accommodate to be compatible with a lot of things. And so I commend that. I'm now looking at the security aspect. I'm looking at what this system is about and how long it's been.
I think Splunk has been like 17 years or so. I gotta check. Yeah, it's about 17, almost 20 years, I think.
It's supposed to. The functionality is so high, and they have used a lot of quantitative reasoning here in this coding. So you're lucky enough, guy, to learn this sort of technology, because I've never seen a technology that lasts that much or that's long, like C#, I mean, not C#, those are just languages. SharePoint and other technologies, other vendors have brought in this moment, at this point. But this being 17 years, meaning it's doing a lot. Does this allow one-time login?
When you mean one-time login, you mean like as far as it expires after that, or?
Oh yeah, like you log in one to the main system here, and then I have to travel, for example, to Chicago or Kansas City, and all I need is just to respond to some requirement questions. I don't have to log in again to be able to access the same data. For example, we're talking about role-based distribution here. So it's a high security here. Access control is required in this software so much. So if it allows one-time login, it may help it better than to have the users have to log in every time, everywhere they go.
The only reason that, well, the issue if you have one-time login is that you can do audits, and from an auditing perspective, you know, it won't work with, especially for like government agencies. You want to know where they logged in, when they logged in, how they logged in. And typically you can integrate this with like Active Directory, SAML, and you can use even a scripted login, a scripted input for logging as well. So there's multiple ways, but unfortunately, I think the system is built so that it can be auditable.
It's understandable. It's understandable. The security issues. It's all is about security. But good for you. This is good.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you very much. I think Sahr, we have one question for
yeah, I'm looking at ASIC Maryland
the chat box. It says that will these tools use them during build and deployment, or are these configured? Thanks.
Yeah, let me so ASIC, your question is, will these tools, Ansible, GitLab, Jenkins, and other tools install on Linux to utilize them during build and deployment, or are these configured? So Ansible, yes, it's a primarily Linux-based tool that's utilized. Actually, I think built by Red Hat. And then GitLab, GitHub, there's both Windows and Linux and Mac versions of that. In my specific environments that I've worked in, 99% of the stuff that's built here it's done through done in Linux environments. Splunk works really, really well in Linux environments. In Windows, it can, but just not as much, just because the resources and stuff that it takes within Windows and how it works with the processors. It just has a lot of issues at times. So typically, you want it to work within a Linux environment. There's just been a lot of bugs with Windows with Splunk. So a lot of times, recommend it to be in a Linux environment. And then you said during build and deployment, or how are these configured? So in terms of configuration, you usually your Ansible and your GitHub, GitLab, all those things are not dependent on Splunk per se. This is just, you know, a talk about Splunk and using these other tools. So these are outside of Splunk. So you would build these solutions, and then you would just create sort of like an environment for Splunk to be able to utilize these. And then what you'll do then is, once you have that hook in, so with Ansible, you need to, of course, have SSH keys. Typically, you don't have to, but typically that's how it works, so that you can automate it. You have the keys passed out, and then, you know, be able to then reach any nodes that you want. So just to make sure that what I'm saying sort of makes sense, right? So on here, this phase right here, you would have your Ansible be connected to all of your nodes essentially. And then that way, if you need to patch, manage, or do any other thing with those, it can directly contact and do, you know, whatever it needs to do, whether it's via script or just a bunch of commands that you need to run, it can do that. So I hope that answered your question. Ochukwe, you asked, are we going to have, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, are we going to have access to this recording? So this is a SLinT, Leoneans and technology effort. And yes, we can publish this so that you can have access to this. I'm actually one of the board members of SLinT, and Tamba, and I think a few others are also here, part of board members. So yeah, we'll give you access to this.
All right, good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, Sahr here. I have a comment question.
Sure. What's up?
Yes.
Hey,
It's Huck.
Oh, Huck, give me a second. I think someone else is asking a question. Just a second, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, really appreciate the presentation. It's really high speed. You know, now I'm starting to just looking at Splunk for the last year or two. Just been taking 1 or 2 certifications here and there. Basically trying to get more into the admin side of things. And I've worked a bit with you know, AWS, the EC2, just to try to build up some instances, then, you know, get some practical. You mentioned about, you know, in a real environment, having to deploy, let's say about 40,000 application servers. And obviously that's being run through a deployment master. I think you made a recommendation to say like I think 4,000 application server to each deployment master. Within within the index and the cluster master you were talking about as well, where you want to, you know, go ahead and set up a cluster within a indexer. Does it when you separate the environment itself, will it be able to replicate to other indexers?
No,
I'm not sure.
When you separate it?
Say again?
What do you mean when you separate the environment? What do you mean? Do you mean like availability zones or regions?
Yeah, okay, I think that's a bit on the high speed side in terms of availability. I'm talking about like when I do it locally, for example, I use like 3 indexers, you know, then, you know, once I set up the cluster master, it'll replicate those. But in a bigger environment that you mentioned earlier, where you probably have maybe 200 or 300 indexers, you said you would want to separate them instead of having like one cluster master managing all those indexes.
Yes, yes.
When you do separate them, if you do separate them, will it still, whatever data the ingester ingest, will it still replicate to all of those indexes that are within the environment, or it'll only be it'll only go to the different cluster that you separated to be? I'm not sure if I'm clear.
No,
I have it in
makes
my
sense.
head, but
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So you're saying essentially this, you're saying within a cluster, right? And you build out another cluster, regardless of whether it's in the same availability zone or whatnot. So you work at Bank of America, or wherever, and you build one cluster here that has 400 indexers, and you have up to 800 indexers. What I'm saying is you don't want to overpower that indexer by having too many indexers communicating to one cluster master. So you may want to split it. So your question is, will this cluster right here replicate to this cluster over here? And the answer to that is no. It will not replicate across yet. It needs to communicate to the same master.
So in other words, it's kind of like you're almost like you're subnetting it.
Yeah, you're creating just a separate site for it.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate it. All right, thanks.
Okay, so I think we have one good participant that has raised his hand up. I think it's Ishak. Ishak, you can unmute your microphone. Ishak, okay, Ishak or Ishak.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Ishak.
Ishak.
It's good. The presentation is very good and educative. But it's a bit oriented. It's a bit development oriented, and I just want to know if we will have such meetings again that will focus more on the monitoring aspect, because we are presently evaluating Splunk. We want to use Splunk, and I'm part of the team that are evaluating Splunk, but we want to use it purely for monitoring. We want to use it purely for monitoring for our information systems team. So I'm thinking if we can have another session wherein we focus more on the monitoring aspects on Splunk, application monitoring, network monitoring, and system monitoring.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly do that. The only thing is this I guess was just a high level conversation about DevSecOps, but if you want it to be specifically tailored to monitoring, I can definitely host a session on that. I mean, the other thing is being a member of SLinT, if you would like for us to do a demo for, I don't know if you work for, like a Sierra Leone, like a SOC within the country, if you work for government or commercial, we can certainly do a demo, and I'm not going to charge. It's free. Don't worry about that. I can do a demo for you guys just to show you how that works. Now, if you do consistent demos, that's something else. We'll have to have a conversation. But if you're just looking for like a high level understanding of this, I've taught Splunk for over 4 years now, so I can definitely give you guys like a private session if you need.
Oh, well, that one is great. I'm working for Sierra Leone Commercial Bank, attached in the security department, information security department. So I'm part of, as I stated earlier, I'm part of the team that is presently evaluating Splunk as against other monitoring tools. We've already set up a server, and we are doing some basic installations and some basic monitoring. But I'm sure you will provide me with details for me to contact you and have a discussion on the demo.
For sure, we'll do.
Yeah, I think that would be a better way. If I find myself in your predicament, I would directly contact her. So it will help you more than to take it on a presentation like this.
No problem.
Yeah, sure. So I think it will be good, like you can have a side chat with Sahr, and then you can pick it up from there and see how best you guys can work it out. So, any more questions? If you have any question, you can unmute your microphone, and then you can hop in. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just put my my email in the chat.
Good.
Feel free to reach out to me via SLinT or whatnot as well.
So this is what we should take to Sierra Leone. Let's take it to Sierra Leone.
Okay, no problem. Okay, no problem. I will reach out to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. We'll do.
Sir, I have a query.
Sure.
Earlier on, before I go to that first, I want to commend the presentation. It was very educative. Earlier on, I heard you speaking about the monitoring of 0 days using Splunk. So I was wondering, with that regards in 0 days, because I'm much more focused in this part of the analysis when it comes to those 0 days attack and that which have to do with malwares.
Sure.
So how well can Splunk actually help in that regard? Because I was looking at it from the blue side of the coin. So how well can you rely on Splunk to detect all those 0 days?
So let me go back to this slide that I initially showed here, right? So let's say on your, let's look at ransomware as one, right? And ransomware is not necessarily 0 day, right? But let's just look at that as a, potential issue that you have in your environment. So we, for most part, we understand how ransomware works in terms of how it starts encrypting things and you start seeing like files being locked. So you're going to have some type of EDR solution, likely some endpoint response tool on your system that's going to be, monitoring that. So whether it's like, like CrowdStrike, or whether you have, what do you call it? Palo Alto traps or something like that, you'll have some tool on your system that's locally monitoring that on your user's laptop. So let's say you have it on a VM. So what Splunk would do then is it reads the data coming directly from that VM and says, hey, this is happening in your environment. Now, this is, of course, with stuff that's known. The stuff that's unknown, you would use other sorts of tools like, Virus Total or, Threat Connect, or other tools that have knowledge of when 0 days occur. And then you'll scrape those CVEs. So as those vulnerabilities get populated, they'll tell you some information about it. So what I would do personally is I would build a scraper for, or get a API key from like a Threat Connect or ICAR or any of those taxi servers that give you feeds on different CVEs. And then based on those CVEs, it'll give you description on, what the actual issue is, and then it'll tell you how to remediate that. So if a 0 day occurs and it happens right away, I will be monitoring a website for 0 days. So as soon as I know about those 0 days, what I'll do then is I'll pull that in via scrape, API, whatever method, pull that data into Splunk. And then once that data is into Splunk, I would have my analysts look at the description of what to do. And then immediately, either my developers or if my engineers do develop, code, whether it's Python, whatever it is, they would then create a script that would then, be used to, remediate whatever it is, whether it's, let's use the case of which one I talked about the print nightmare, like that spooling piece. If we wanted to quickly create a code that says, all right, we know that all of our Windows systems aren't utilizing the print functionality, so we need to disable that. So as soon as we script that CV, it tells us what the description is about that specific 0 day threat. Then what we'll do then is we would then build a script that then responds to that specific threat. And then Splunk in itself will tell you all the systems that are vulnerable to that specific threat. So you can use Tenable or any other scanning system, or you can deploy a script that can then pull that into Splunk and then tell you all the systems that have issues. And then what you can then do is then run a scripted action against that system to be able to remediate that. So whether you want to use Splunk's innate SOAR tool, which is Phantom, or you want to use something like Demisto or something like that to then, do some type of action to then stop that process. So that's one way of doing it, and that's one way that I would probably advocate for. But there are other methods that people utilize. So I hope that sort of helps or answers the question. And Mohammed, let me know if it doesn't. I can chime in a little bit more. And if you're talking, you're on mute, by the way.
Hey guys, do we still have a question? If you have a question, you can please unmute your microphone. And then, or if we don't have any question, we can call it a day.
Okay, Almami, please. This is Dr. Kamara again. If you don't mind, next Friday, I want you to have me and Dr. Samba. I think this work will be ready by then, because I want you to we have to do this before you leave.
Okay, sir. Got you.
Yeah.
Got you.
Next Friday.
Okay. So I think SLinT mean we are good. We are all filled up with this amazing presentation today. So I want to thank you very, very much for attending. Okay. Someone that we said. Okay. El Shaddadi, yeah, we can come in.
Crypto.
Thank you very much, Prince Lebbie, for this wonderful presentation. I figured out that I have a lot of questions, which I've already figured out that you might not be able to answer. And seeing I joined in late, and I have no knowledge about this, I better just reserve that to learn more about this application. And then next time I'll be able to ask you a question. But again, thank you very much for this. This is great.
No problem. I was developing a script to do a deployment within AWS CLI for you, man.
I hope you can develop a script for me where you'll be able to analyze this a lot of signals in crypto.
Yeah.
Sure, man.
And again, sir.
Yes, sir.
If
I think with the crypto guy is here. El Shaddadi. That's good.
Sir, again, if you would be chanced, actually, I would really love to have an in-depth into this Splunk. I used it, it was just like a general overview during my course, and when I had an intern with the CDC, Cyber Defense Center. So we were just introduced to it. Since I was more focused with malware analysis, I was not too much looking into Splunk, since it was like a pure SOC kind of a thing. But I'm now getting interested into it, and I would love to know more about it and dive deep into it. Whenever you are chanced, sir, maybe we can talk about this in private and then see how best you can help me with it.
For sure. I'll ping you, bro.
Sure.
One last thing, sir. Are you currently teaching enterprise security? I've done the power user, the core, and the sysadmin. I need to do the enterprise security. Are you teaching that course?
Man, I just had to take a break. I just finished my class this past Thursday. Yeah, man, I need to take a break. But I will teach ES. Maybe give me another few months to kind of recoup. I'll teach ES and I'll let you know.
Okay, all right, definitely. I'm definitely interested.
Sure.
So the commission rate for every new customer is 20%, okay?
Yeah, this guy.
You'll be paying in crypto.
For every new customer you acquire as a result of this presentation, there is a 20% commission.
Now snitching back when I come back, I don't send that.
Yes, sir.
But this is good. This was good presentation. Thank you.
This is for the.
I think.
I'm also interested in any course. So if you have any classes starting anytime soon, could you please put it on the forum so that some of us might join?
Sure. We'll do that.
Yeah, sure. I think I also would need to bring it up because I am aware that having some short calls for folks that are interested in Splunk and I think all the tech skills. So like please if you are starting sometime soon, please let us know so like we can make some sort of advertisement and then we can do some sort of official process so folks will be interviewed and then sign up for the training. But thank you very much, sir. Your presentation was awesome. So that's all.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, and I muted some of you guys, so feel free to unmute. I just don't, I know I saw a lot of mics were open. But if you have any other comments or questions or concerns, just let me know. One thing I want to say is there is, I was going to do an actual demo with Ansible and all that other stuff, but I just haven't had time to fully build it. This week was really hectic. Like my guy, Evelyn, who's about to probably say something here. Yeah, this week was just really tiresome, but go ahead, Evelyn.
Man, this guy is using Splunk to monitor everything. He could figure right when I was about to speak.
Everything.
Anyway, guys, no great presentation. I kind of jumped in a little late, but just great job. I guess I'm on a new mantra basically. With under this new mandate, is to have further discussions around the skill set itself of Splunk engineers, support staff, etc., and try to see how to actually create some sort of cluster of possibilities to train a boatload of people in Sierra Leone in anticipation of outsourcing support possibilities. Sir. And then another question that I had is for the guys on the ground. I am trying to inquire, I haven't been around for a bit. I'm trying to inquire if there's any fiber, LAN cable, or what it'll take to get it to Aberdeen Road, Banlin area. Thank you.
I can help you answer the last one. And I think there is someone within the current SLinT group who will actually be able to answer that question. So one is the CEO of Zood Labs, who is the one that's managing the fiber. He is in the SLinT group. I added him recently, just in case you don't know.
Excellent.
So if you pop that question, he knows the network and he's working on that. I was also made to know from some of the service providers that the government is actually building a metro network in Freetown, and that metro fiber-based metro network is going to be ready sometime this year. It could be in November or December. And once that metro network is ready, then all of the ISPs are pretty much going to be riding on top of that network to provide last mile solutions. And part of those last mile solutions are going to include fiber to your home or fiber to your premises. As some of you know, my company is building an office somewhere around Hillcourt Road, and I've been inquiring to get basically two types of networks. One that is fiber, physical cable connection from the main metro network into my building, and then a wireless microwave. And as a result of that, I've been doing this background search. So they promised me that if that metro network goes live, I will be able to get a live connection into my premises, direct from the backbone. So if anything, I would say the answer to you will be most likely yes, if you are in that about it. If you are somewhere around the western area of, around the western part of Freetown or central part of Freetown, 90%, 99% you will have a point of presence close to you. If you are far east, that's a whole nother story.
Well, that's good to know, because definitely, I mean, the approach is a little different in trying to make sure that we can secure those lines of communications, both via microwave and physical cable landing.
Yeah, it's just expensive. The price they quoted, the cheapest price I've gotten is somewhere around $800 a month for 5 megabits per second download. Yeah, 5 megabits per second download and upload dedicated with the fiber cable. That's the cheapest they've quoted so far.
Well, I think, I'm sorry we're digressing here into that, but these are all key infrastructures to the broader goal of trying to even talk about possibilities for outsourcing. And I think one of the things I mentioned to the president was how expensive some of these things are in terms of the role of NatCom in some regulatory component to really drive this industry. I mean, when we fought to get this fiber optic cable, these were not the prices we were thinking of in terms of helping to influence an ecosystem or infrastructure base that was expensive. The whole idea was to try to get cost reduction significant, not a monopoly that is affecting things right now. So I think we still have a lot of work to do as an industry, but there at least we're starting from somewhere. At least it's available, because when you look at the utilization of that fiber optic, it at least as of last count, it was like less than 5 or 10%. If it's less than 5 or 10%, it means that the demand is not there to have the sort of prices that we're hearing.
Yeah, it's way underutilized. I agree with you. And if there is anything I think we can focus on and even benefit from directly as an industry, it will be how do we increase the utilization and therefore decrease the cost, right? Does it mean we have to decrease the cost to increase the utilization, or do we have to first increase the utilization by creating applications that people depend on and therefore drive them to have the need for internet access, so for high-speed internet access, and then hence reduce the price? I think if we can come up with a strategy around that, it will be a winner for us as an industry. But right now it's grossly underutilized, and you can't blame the service providers either. And you know that from a business standpoint, right? If I'm going to create a last mile solution for only 10 customers, when I'm expecting 1,000 customers, I'm going to divide my cost among 10 customers instead of 1,000. So everybody's going to be paying for what should have been paid for by 1,000 people.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I think that is front and center. I mean, if we're talking three things that you need, is that you need the human resource, you need the power, you need the communications to be there. And if those three things don't align, you could start, at least something small, but it's not sustainable in the long run if you don't get those. And my goal is, as an industry now, is to come up with policy initiatives that can actually force these prices down by actually giving license to smaller providers who want to actually take up on that and create a solid competition from a licensing regime that may be an interim break period of between 1 and 2 years or 3 years, working in consultation with others, that literally the government is giving those licenses for free, and then having some open systems that allow, sort of like a virtual network operator to use some of those infrastructures to allow competition to bring that price down. We have to force the price down regardless. These guys are not going to drop the price down. I mean, it's the same guys, it's the same players time and time again. And there's no interest in dropping those prices down unless they're forced through some policy means.
Yep, so let's do it. So you just got a lot of customers. We can take half of that money.
Yeah, Mr. Lamy, in regards to what you're talking about, instead of reducing cost or increasing cost, I think what people have to realize that once you have a product, you really need to do some marketing about it, do some research about. For instance, if I have a $500, right? I said my product is for $500, and within the specific geographic location I'm in, only one person will be able to afford to pay me $500 for that stuff. What if I divide that $500 into 5? I say, okay, instead of $500, because only one person within the geography will be able to pay for $500. If I divide this into 5 and make it $100 for each, then at the end of the day, those who can afford to really pay $100 is going to be a lot of people, and then you can drive a lot of people to your product because it's reduced. So instead of only one person affording to pay $500, now you have about 1,000 people paying you $100. So at the end of the day, you'll be still able to make profit from your product. But people don't do a lot of research. They just in most in Africa, like Sierra Leone, they just go up and then start charging people because it's, oh, you know what, these people might not be able to pay me this much, and I want to make this amount of money, and therefore, because only few people will be able to pay this, I'm going to charge based on these few people. But that's really strategies that people need to understand in marketing.
We might, I know we're digressing from the Splunk aspect of it, and I just want to make sure, Sahr, please make sure I get an answer to my first part. How can we make Sierra Leone like the Splunk nation of the world to outsource to as a back office? But in those key things we're talking about with regards to the prices, these are deliberate means that some governments have used. They are deliberate policy initiatives that you can use to actually get that to those levels, without seeming that you're crushing private sector. I think you're creating more room for competition, smaller operators coming. You might even get some larger operators externally to come in. You just need to increase the competition. That's what's going to force it down. Some people are going to need to build new infrastructures around it. The government building a metro fiber network is also a big part of it. I think we just need to be very intentional about how this happens. I remember when we were doing that whole fiber optic thing, I think one of the important things that Chater mentioned then was when they said it was going to cost $42 million thereabout, we were doing the IC policy then. Then some of the guys who didn't understand it, like, oh, that's too expensive. Government has other priorities. There's healthcare, this and that and that and that. So Chater's expression was like, the cost of not having it is a lot more than $42 million. In terms of the impact it can have on population. I think we drove that point well enough that the president was able to push it for the World Bank to finally grant the approval for the funding. I think we failed significantly on what we call pre-landing activities and post-landing activities that were supposed to have spawned out the level of smaller industries, cottage industries that would have created some level of competition to help bring price down and also increase demand. But in a nation where you really have less than 10% utilization, I mean, the point that Tamba was making in terms of demand, or supply on one end, in terms of how that affects cost, I mean, there's a great demand for the product. It's just that the pricing is just not right. Maybe we need to look at the sort of technology infrastructures that some of these providers have to help influence that, because if you want to have people learning Splunk over there and all this other type of stuff, they need infrastructure to do it. They need the bandwidth to do it. But anyway, let me not go further into this digression. I think that's a subject for another day. We need to address the subject possibilities of what it would take to build the correct ecosystem for doing things for really making sure that an outsourcing destination.
That's going to be actually one of the topics I want to talk about, but I want to talk about them while I'm in Freetown. Right? Because I want to be able to, during such a talk, do live demonstration, tell you, here is the kind of connection I'm using, and here is how much I'm paying, and here is my speed test right now as I'm doing this. It's very interesting, but I don't know.
I'll be working on at least close in concert with a lot of other folks on a comprehensive strategy of what the location readiness index would mean for Sierra Leone in getting to that. So definitely let's collaborate.
Yep. Then we should take that on. It's important.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So I think Tamba, as I mentioned earlier, you need to see our best, and we can post you and Travis because we would just set up an innovation hub, and we are looking forward to see how best we can host so many SLinT folks out there, so they can share their experiences, knowledge, and even guide some young with students to the. So actually, we take that side out of here. So I want to thank you very, very much, each and every one of you, for attending to this session, as it was very, very interactive and quite amazing. So without wasting much time, I want to stop here, and we are going to close now. And
let me just answer Evelyn's question, and then we can close if that's all right.
Okay.
Because there's a question, I think it's important. So in regards to SLinT, right? So everything that we're doing here is to build up, Sierra Leone, in terms of like resources and knowledge and ability to, scale. So in regards to how can we make, I guess, Sierra Leone, more so like a hub for outsourcing talents, and even to utilize Splunk in Sierra Leone. There's several things, of course, that are intrinsic to any environment that's utilizing a tool like Splunk. One of the biggest things, and I probably know you guys have this on the roadmap already, with power and sustainability, and then just make sure that there's a little bit of redundancy there. So that's one of the biggest things that's needed. I know that Ishak mentioned that at SL Bank, I think SLCB Bank is doing some work with Splunk. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Ishak, but if that's the case, redundancy is going to be like a big piece there, because you need to monitor everything that's happening either on the wire or either it's happening at different endpoints. And if that's the case, you're going to need to make sure that Splunk is up and running. It's similar to AWS in a sense where there's redundancy there. So one of the biggest things we need to have is have systems that are redundant and highly available, of course, for users. And Splunk is a possible tool that we can use for in-house stuff, but it's very expensive. Just to be honest, I work with a lot of enterprises now where some are paying $100+ million, some are paying, $70,000-$80,000 for a very small license. And so it's a very expensive tool. It does really good work at what it's supposed to do, but in terms of the operational costs for it, it's very expensive. That's why there are other tools like Cribble, you have Curadar, you have Elk that are out there as solutions. And I have experience with those as well. And I would probably almost pivot to those solutions at this stage, just because just for cost, like upfront cost, I would probably utilize those. But if there's a customer that does have the money and they are ready to basically implement that at the local level, then we can certainly build out fairly easily. That the biggest thing, of course, is knowledge transfer and then being able to split that out. I do consulting for a company now in Ghana, and I've done some consulting from other international resources. And I have a team that does that. And, I know you've done that for decades, man. So we can definitely partner to do that. We need to just have, I think, sort of like a trainer model going forward, to have people on ground who can learn just some of the basics. And then we focus on those teachers, and then they sort of spread the wealth out. And then we do, quarterly or, semi-annual check-ins and stuff like that. And then do sort of like remote support for that. And that's the model that I'm currently using with another customer right now. Now, if we're looking at, let's say being like a SOC that is being outsourced, from different companies, let's say we're a sub of a sub. So, Department of, we can't use the federal government. Let's say Bank of, Eurasia, whatever it is, has a an environment that they want to monitor to make sure that they don't get any issues. And they give the contract to some other big prime, and then they sub it out. And then we can be that sub then that can do the same thing as they do in Philippines, the same thing that they do in, in parts of India, same thing that they do in many other, third world countries that are starting to get into this now, Argentina, Brazil. We can do the same exact thing. We just need the redundant power source to be able to manage a SOC, and then be able to monitor those things on an active basis. Now, one thing I did want to mention also is that Splunk can be used for real time, but it's not necessarily a real time tool. It's just like if somebody were to hack into your environment, you're not going to be able to tell or do anything like the second that they do that. It doesn't make any sense. You can do something maybe 5, 10, or 15 minutes after, but for the most part, you don't need to monitor stuff real time. So we just need to have a dashboard that's regularly populated or updated, at a 20-second, 30-second, latency phase to be able to give us that information, which is semi-real time in a sense anyway, if you think about it that way. But I hope that sort of answers it, that there are definitely ways that we can do this. And, you having a training background, and me also, having, trained for a few years now, with Splunk, and doing the same thing internationally, it's possible. There's quite a few Splunkers even in this this meeting right now, and Mohammed is on ground. He's one person that I know can be like a trainer in a sense down there. So I hope that helps, man. And I'm ready to kind of help out in any way possible, dude.
No, that's fine. Thank you for the response. Of course, I'm also just trying to be deliberate in terms of beginning to have the discussion that leads to that broader set of possibilities in forming clusters of possibilities around what some of us are already integrated with in our current lives, and then trying to see how to potentially expand that where it's feasible in the sharing context, and beginning to, and by so doing, we address a lot of other things on the ground. I think one of the good things you realize on the Indian side, just to close, is what was good about India's tech journey in outsourcing was that they also started using those tools locally in India, and that began to improve Indian institutions, governance, etc., to a point where at least they've gotten a lot better now in areas that ordinarily they would not be using some of those tools. So we hope for the better, and certainly with the training aspect of it, that would be the first part of beginning to get an army of folks out there that would be ready to potentially work independently, subcontractors, and the whole nine yards. Thank you.
Fantastic, man. Yeah, I'm definitely wishing you the best, man. Anything we can do to help.
Okay. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you. We do appreciate each and every one of you. I think we have our next session October 16th, on the 16th of October. So if you want to be a speaker, or if you want to present some work you're doing, or some of your ideas or anything, you can reach out to me, or you can reach out to Sir. We can get you sorted for the 16th of October. So thank you very much. I think we are going to close now, sir. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.